Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We discuss our panel, Ukraine on the world map. I would like to start with a short presentation of what we discussed today, and I would like to tell all the speakers that Minister Tymofiy Mylovanov will leave us in 1 hour, so we have to use this opportunity to talk to him and to discuss this matter with him. So if you please, with your first speeches, be a bit shorter to give the opportunity to the audience to ask questions and ask Minister about his opinion. My name is Volodymyr Panchenko. I'm your moderator, as you understand. We will have today two votings. One at the beginning. The operator, please show us the questions. You have the opportunity to vote for your choice. What is needed to change Ukrainian position on world global economic map? So you can vote now, and then we change at the end whether we change your opinion or it would be the same. KIEF International Economic Forum was started in 2014 as an answer to the neoliberal policy of the government, and we wanted to give the opportunity to have a platform for discussion. So in 5 years, as you see, this is a very successful forum, but the economic policy has not changed in those 5 years. So Mr. Yatsenyuk, the Prime Minister of 2014, was consistent libertarian. He said about that. Mr. Groysman, the next Prime Minister, used populist slogans just to achieve his political aims, and it was not quite economical. So today we have a new parliament, a new government, and quite ambitious aims were announced in September, that we will have 40% growth of GDP next 5 years, and also will attract as a country $50 billion investments. And as we understand from the program, this will be based on opening agricultural land market. Second, will be the growth of GDP will be based on that foreign direct investments, $50 billion, and development of IT sector. That's why my first question to Minister Mylovanov. Dear Minister, what are the specifics of this policy, and what are the difference from what I mentioned about Mr. Yatsenyuk and Mr. Groysman? Please.
Thank you very much. Thank you for presenting me with the opportunity to speak to you. It's a privilege. Thank you for having me here. This is fundamentally the most important question. We want Ukraine economy, all of us, we want it to grow. We want all of us together to succeed. And then the question is, what's different? How do we plan to achieve that? And why our promises or our actions are credible? In some sense, everyone knows what needs to be done. And these very questions, which were here a second ago, they're all important. Protection of property rights, support and promotion of export, privatization. I'm going to be adding other items which were not necessarily on the the regulation is there too. It's at 0% at this point. Free trade agreements and such, yes. But in our portfolio currently we have 5 areas on which we're going to focus. One is land market reform, but it's just much more broad than simply opening the land market. I would even say we're not planning to set up the market for land. It's actually there. It's actually there. It's about the shadow in it, about making it transparent and giving an opportunity for competition. We have a little project with the media. In fact, most of the economic media of Ukraine, we're going to be meeting with them today and on Monday. And also with Geocadastre, that's the register of land, and with the World Bank and other IFIs. And it's a simple project. Today we have the satellite data. Satellite data allows us to identify what's being grown, the type of crop, the productivity, how much of that, when was it harvested, and so on. And then we see in Geocadastre whether it was reported or not. And you know, I posted recently, or I wrote recently about how in the Ministry of Defense, in certain areas we have land which is being rented out for agricultural production. But apparently there is some discrepancy between what is officially reported, the amount of taxes being paid, and what we identify using satellite data. The competition has to come. The transparency has to come to Ukrainian markets, agriculture being one of them. But it has to come, otherwise we're not going to grow. And we will use all the tools available to the government and to the society. One is competition, opening up markets. The other one is, of course, enforcement. Tax authorities will come and ask questions why harvest is underreported, why land rental is why taxes are not paid. But also, you know, critically we need to strengthen the law enforcement. We need to strengthen the property rights. So agriculture is just one area, but it's such a symbolic area for us. It's not because it is an important area, but it's not the only area. But we have had a moratorium on lands trade since 2001, right? Over 18 years, we have not been able to resolve this issue. If we are able to move forward now, that means that things are different. That's a simple signal. That's why we are focusing on land market. So if we succeed in that, we demonstrate that, you know, there is a change. And Ukraine is worth paying attention to. And then this way the government will demonstrate credibility. So the second area is, of course, privatization and investment climate and FDIs, but also domestic investment, the cost of capital, all the areas related to capital investment and management of assets. There we're going to create the National Wealth Fund. We're going to prioritize a number of companies. We're going to, and we're talking about hundreds to thousands of companies, and we're going to demonopolize areas in which have been protected. The third area, of course, is export promotion. I see Natalia Mikolskaya has been there, being previously the Deputy Minister of in Ministry of Economy and Trade, responsible for trade, and she has created such a fantastic foundations for what we're doing now, which is continue. But that's the area of interest for us. Trade is critical. And then the other two areas which are substantive are competition policy and labor market reform. So within several weeks you will see a new labor code proposed by the government. And that will the purpose of that code is to liberalize relationships and make them de facto real today, remove barriers which are present there. Now, 40% of economic growth is an ambitious target. We're issuing forecasts at 3.7%. That's what for the next year. So we have a lot of catching up to do. But I always bring the example, I always show the example of inflation in Ukraine. In 2014 and 2015, when inflation was 30 to 60%, you know, at points, but 40%, Ukraine said, you know, we're going to have a target of 5%. We're going to bring it down to 5%, and everyone was laughing at this ambitious objective. Now, 4 years into this, we're actually finally starting to reach this objective. We have been in single digits now for a while, but our forecast for inflation is in 5.3, 5.2, depending on the scenarios for the next year, several years. So we're actually reaching that objective. We just have to continue to be responsible in terms of macroeconomic policy, in terms of fiscal and monetary policies. But now it's time to, you know, create ambitious objectives in terms of investment, first of all, but also in terms of business climate, property rights protection, liberalization, privatization, competition policy, agricultural development, and labor market. Labor market is critical because it's a political consideration. This is pretty much it.
Thank you, Minister. You are in time. you had the speech of 7 minutes, so please take this as an example. All the other speakers. I would like to remind you that we have Telegram bot which gives you an opportunity to ask questions. I ask also the organizers, I don't have that on my mobile. If you think that I send letters to my lovely ones, I wanted to look whether the questions, there are no questions, dear organizers, please check that. I would like to come to businessmen, which you addressed your policy, economic policy. Our next speaker will be Kostyantyn Yefymenko. He is president of pharmaceutical company Biopharma. We know him as bright entrepreneur, very good speaker, manager, social activist, professional with 20 years of implementation of investment projects in Ukraine. The question to you, Kostyantyn, that you are indisputable leader in your companies, and your companies are indisputable leaders in the sectors where you work. And you have very different opposite businesses, machine building and pharmaceuticals in one hand. It looks like you know some business secrets because you know how to find an idea, you know how to organize a team and then to win. But what about the global markets? You export to Asia, you export to Europe. Do you think your activity is sustainable? And the valuable question, whether government can be involved in your success on the global market. You are a national champion, but will national champions have any assistance from the government, or the government should not interfere, like we saw from Mr. Mylovanov's speech, that there will be a labor market, there will be low inflation, but they don't tell anything in their program about national champions. They think you are the sources of corruption here in Ukraine. So it is better that you... No, I don't speak about Biopharma. I talk about oligarchs. Oligarchs, when Mr. Yefymenko will become an oligarch, then the government will not like him. So it's better not to become an oligarch. In any case, so you are a national champion. So will you stay as national champion on global market, and how long? Because as you understand, our panel is about changing the global face of Ukrainian economy.
Thanks a lot. Good afternoon to everyone. Really, we knew some secret of success for Biopharma, but before Jack Ma had his speech, when he actually disclosed our secret, 9 by 9, 6 days a week, that's the whole secret. There are some smarter companies which probably better understand the market, but we will really surpass everyone. Tripo Company Group is a supplier of some components for Peugeot, Citroën, Volkswagen. So we assemble some componentry for Volkswagen and Skoda. And Biopharma also has the turnover, which is very high. We have started a new plant, and we control 4% of the market of EB. And this is only the beginning. Do you know what Ukraine needs to become a success? And I'm talking here only about industry. So for us to understand where our place is, we need to realize where we are. Starting with 1995 up till 2005, for some specific reasons, owners of plants were not the families which had been built by the had built these companies. like nobody was talking about the product in the family environment. They were not developing these plants and these products. I don't know what they were talking about, in fact, but it's clear that it was not about the product and not about conquering the market. People got the plants which were not ready mentally for such management. I will not give a lot of examples, but just one of them. A company which bought Avtozas. It's clear that the level of the company which bought Avtozas was far from being the level of Avtozas, and therefore we have got zero production of of cars. 25 plants of Soviet importance were stopped, like 5 of them in Melitopol. This is the motor plant and some other plants. Why? Because the person who became the owner of the plant was not of the same level that was necessary for managing this plant. What should the state have done? Should it have interfered? Surely yes, because that is the fate of cities, of towns. For example, my town, Bila Tserkva, stopped selling, which is my native town, stopped selling some components, like tires, for to Avtozas, and the state had to redeem this plant and to arrange a kind of a tender for that. Now it's already too late, because Renault has 4 plants in Russia. They have also a plant in Romania, and they have it in Turkey. So nobody will buy this plant. So this phase has passed. Really, we have several phases, several oligarchs, but with time they will lose their plants. That's clear, and definitely the state should interfere. What do businessmen need and what I don't see here? Well, you know, I'm generally not ready to talk about property right, ownership right. That is, you know, a sacred issue. They were building these plants we are building our plants for us and for our children. But if the plant may change the owner overnight, so what kind of situation is it? It's absolutely unclear, and I cannot even discuss this. Also, as far as deregulation, decentralization are concerned, these are not the issues we are mostly interested in. We need credits, we need money. And if we have the rate of 20% per year, so nobody will ever work in this environment. And I don't see this issue on the agenda of the state. Also, all those problems of connecting to engineering networks, to electricity, well, this should also be the responsibility of the state. You know, we work a lot and we will overcome all the barriers, no matter what they allow us to or what they don't. I will keep working in my native town of Bila Tserkva, but the issue is that whether my 3 children would be willing to build a plant in such conditions, would they really feel secure about that? And I'm not getting them ready for this. Will foreign investors come? I don't know. But I know that one of the companies bought a land in Vinnytsia, wanted to buy a plant, but now it has to pay extreme amounts of money for connection to electricity grids, but the owners were not ready for this, to pay this amount. So this is just connection to electricity, and if we have such problems, it means that no investor will come. Just go to any school and ask the students of high school what their dream is, and 95% of children dream of going to at least East Europe to have their education there. So what are we talking about? We don't have any capacity for the future, any prospects, and the government should be clear in saying that, okay, we have made errors, we have made mistakes, and that's where we are, that is our status quo, and we need the program for the future. Our future is in agriculture, but it is in processing and not raw materials. How many plants dealing with grain processing do we have? One in Dnipro. You know, we are exporting 4 million tons to Turkey out of the 40 which we generally export abroad. And how many processing plants do they have in Turkey, cargo plants? Absolutely a lot of them with high capacity. So why are we not asking this question? Why do we have MHP? What about the plants which they will built. The plant will be very costly, but if you take a credit for that, you will never do this. I think that we need to take care of this issue and to be clear about it. We should claim what our priorities are and shape the goals. And I'm about to finish. In agriculture, we have some plants dealing with ammonium fertilizers. We have 6 of them, but they don't operate. We used to control 4% of such plants in the world, but now these ammonia plants are not operating. They are in standstill. So what is the state policy about that? Or agreements? Okay, we could come into an agreement with Russia because we have some pipes through which nothing is going. They are absolutely empty. Why shouldn't we come into agreement with Arabs to build an LNG terminal? Can't we find 6 billion cubic meters to really make those plants with ammonium fertilizers to operate? You know, industrial plants are the future. A lot of experts from abroad claim that you don't need that, but actually they also claim that they will build. That is all complicated. We will do it for you. We will produce it for you. But it cannot be that way because we have to fight with foreigners in this respect. Triba is company number 1 in the global network in one component production, and also Biopharma is number 2 in terms of some pharmaceutical products, and that will be valid for all the products.
Minister wants to answer.
Мікрофон. Дякую дуже. Тут багато популізму.
Well, there have been a lot of populistic things mentioned. Correct, populistic things, but LNG terminal. Turkey will not allow us to do this. So we have to understand what our place is. Secondly, we need to tell the truth, both we and you. Also, everybody is aware of the problems with trucks going to Poland. There is no quota. Let's discuss this. Why not? Yes, we had a meeting with the Prime Minister and the President of Poland. I'm not going to argue with you here. I just don't want to argue. But you've been right in saying that we should really fight. We should struggle, and we don't have any friends in this respect. I do agree with the things which you mentioned about agriculture and processing, about being fair and honest. But then you need to understand that there is no simple solution. And credibility, is another thing. If there is no cheap capital, nothing will come of that. I do agree with you here. But you cannot just tell, and by the way, you haven't mentioned this thing, you cannot just tell that you can create cheap capital overnight. That will never be the case. We won't have cheap capital when everybody is letting everyone down. The state, the business, law enforcement agencies, they all do it like this. Also, whether we have any cheap money or no, there is some cheap money. I've checked it. I've made an audit of the availability of money, and the European Investment Bank 400 million euros, and the debt is negative. Plus 0.7 is the margin. That has been taken for agro-sector, 0 taken in 2018, in 2019. Why? Because nobody can show a clean, a pure business model out of the people who would actually take this money. Only in EIB, in the audit, I saw that only 17% has been taken. We don't know how to take this money because we cannot show clean and transparent business model. Somewhere something is wrong with accounting balance sheets. With some, we also have some other problems. So I'm very grateful to you for your healthy populism, I would call it like that. but probably we still need to be clear about other problems. Just one comment. The first thing about populism. I wouldn't like to give any assessment, but you know, we have built a company with a turnover of $250 million, and we earn a lot, and we invest more than 25 million every year. That's why we really can tell that our words are true, and we can easily measure the results, both in dollars and in hryvnias. I used to be CEO of Ukrtransgaz. I worked there since 2002 up to till 2009, and I can tell you that the pipelines going through Romania and Bulgaria are going beyond Bosphorus, and we don't need to make our terminals reaching those Bosphorus. We just can build it on the continental part of Bulgaria, and then LNG gas should be transported by ships, because in its cryogenic form it can be reduced in scope almost 600 times. But I think that probably it's easier to come into agreement with Russians. But I'm saying just that we used to control 4% of the global market of ammonia fertilizers. That's why when we're talking about this, there must be mentioned that Ukraine probably didn't have any such percent in any other field. Also, another thing is credits, expensive credits. My neighbor in Dnipro is Rosava company. Rosava company has taken 2.5 billion hryvnias from the bank, and actually it is subject to this deposit security foundation. And for 4 years it has not been put on sale, but now it is put on sale in the amount of 18 billion hryvnias in pool. Why not take Rosan on a tender? Probably we would buy it, and probably Rosava would be in a better situation. Maybe that's why we need money. As far as LNG is concerned, well, that's true. As far as fertilizers is concerned, an agreement with the Russians. I will not comment upon the agreement with the Russians as an issue, but I've recently had a talk in Washington with the chief advisor of the National Economic Council of Mr. Obama. And we were speaking about whether it is possible for us to be competitive in the conditions when the prices of gas and carriers are, in particular in the field of fertilizers, are market-like. Some of our plants which were built are now not competitive. They could become competitive only if we get subsidies for energy. Of course, we will get subsidies if we can make an agreement with the Russians, but that will not make us sovereign. That is not the necessary and adequate economic model. I'm not criticizing you. I'm grateful to you for having this fair discussion in Ukraine, for arranging it. But sometimes we have opportunities, and sometimes we cannot do certain, we cannot take certain steps. I do agree that there are a lot of issues dealing with repayment of debts in our financial system, and I will do my best, and the government will do its best for the people who did not repay credits to bear financial and legal liability. In the world, we don't have any other modern, updated and better ammonia fertilizer plant than Odessa port plant, where that is the best and the most advanced planet on the Earth.
It's becoming hotter and hotter. Thank you, speakers. We do not doubt that KIEF International Economic Forum is the best in Ukraine in its sector. We are the best forum. And I would like, before giving the possibility to talk to our next speaker, I would like to remind a speech of President Zelensky this morning. If you remember, he said the futurists, the people who try to predict future, they always predict, but they mistake. Sometimes in the movie it was told that the futurists are lying always. And the President Zelensky, he said, sometimes they lie. When I started my presidency campaign, there were two other leaders. I was not considered to be a leader, but I'm here. So sometimes the futurists lie. I would like to tell the same about the countries. When the war ended between North Korea and South Korea was an agrarian country. Everybody predicted that they should do only agro-exports forever. And there was only one person, President Park Geun-hye, who told we will become an industrial nation. And it happened. So, but I would like also to underline something which was told by Mr. Yefymenko. He mentioned demonopolization. This is something for the government and a very important thing, especially in energy sector. And also he explained about privatization. So you want to sell 3,600 enterprises. Try to resell the enterprises, maybe like the enterprise mentioned in Zaporizhia. But let's go back to our discussion. Mr. Nicolas is a well-known of his Reputation Institute. You work with reputation. You know numerous indexes of successful companies as well as numerous indexes of the countries. But you don't look at that indexes, you work with them, as far as I understand. You are very regular in advising about reputation for companies, for the countries, for sole employers, for people, for persons. And as far as I understand, you think reputation is an economic factor. We usually here think that reputation is about helping the poor, but you think that reputation can give you more wealth, you can become richer. Please tell about that.
Sure thing. So thanks a lot for having me. You're right. I represent a company called Reputation Institute. We're an independent agency, and what we do is pretty much help places around the world, countries, cities, regions, and also companies in managing their reputation. So the reason why we do that is that companies around the world, and countries for that matter, they understand that reputation drives stakeholder support. You need people to perceive you in a positive way on the things that matter for them in order for them to support you, right? So if you want foreign direct investment, well, the idea would be to identify those segments that are prospects of investing, and then understanding what they think of you before you start trying to attract them to invest in your particular country. Same goes for tourism. If you're trying to attract tourists to come to your country, you need to identify which are those tourists, prospect tourists, who would presumably come and visit your country, and then think about or measure what your reputation is amongst them in order to try to communicate with them and try to get them to your country. And I understand that reputation-wise, the Ukraine has a challenge at current. And so we were talking this morning in the press conference with the minister about the fact that one of the most important things is to build trust and understand expectations and adapt your actions and what you're talking about with the expectations of the audiences that you're trying to attract. And we know from the surveys that we do, we have a tool called RepTrack, and so we measure the reputation of the largest economies in the world, including the Ukraine, and we measured the reputation of Ukraine, and you can only imagine what the reputation of the Ukraine is. At current, it's fairly challenged, but not only internationally, it's also fairly challenged domestically. So it seems as if the reputation of the Ukraine, according to our studies, domestically, is more challenged than it is internationally. So the groups that I'm working with here in the Ukraine, government, the minister, part of these conversations, and a group called Business 100, which is some of the most prominent businesses in the Ukraine, have joined forces, which I think is really the whole exercise here, is to join forces instead of creating friction, which I think there's plenty of here in this particular panel. So I think the main idea is for them to join forces, find out what it is that the Ukraine wants to be known for, and then start communicating to the audiences that you want to attract in terms of support. But that exercise starts from within, where it seems as if the domestic general public does not have trust in its own country to the extent that you would want before you start communicating internationally. So we're hearing the minister talking about this morning, and that's something that they're looking into, and certainly the project that we're doing, which we've labeled Reputation Strategy of Ukraine, will be focusing on creating this narrative and trying to attract external stakeholders towards this country, in addition to building confidence within.
Thank you. I would like to remind our audience that we have questions, and maybe this question will be to Nicolas. Please, when you send questions to Telegram, address them to specific specific speaker. So Jack Ma was mentioned, and he told that we have to help to specific qualities or abilities of the nation. And what is about Ukrainian mentality that you think should be developed? Education or what else? I think we will address it to you from the point of view of reputation or just development of the country. And also, Mr. Mylovanov has a question. When you will adopt the strategy on digital development of economy? So let's first with Nicolas, and please, Minister, answer that question.
So I think the very first exercise, as I was saying before, is to start by building the narrative and finding the national heroes that you want to communicate both internally to build trust and confidence, after which you start communicating externally. So the idea would be to develop a narrative that's built on the history of the Ukraine, because I can assure you that when we do our studies externally, they don't know anything about all the good things that are happening here in the Ukraine, whether with biotech type of companies or any of the other good things that you have here in the Ukraine. So the first exercise is going to be to find all the good things that you're doing in terms of communicating those, and then attracting foreign direct investment and tourism using those.
Thank you. Minister?
Я українською відповім.
I will answer in Ukrainian. So the question was about the digital strategy for economic development. I've not been working in the government for quite long. It's only about 2 months, a little bit more. But I've come to understand that there can be not too many strategies. We have 130 and something strategies. Maybe we need a separate strategy for a digital economy development, but it should be a real strategy, not just the one written on paper, but the one which is in the minds of those who are going to implement it, which is by far more complicated to arrange than to just write it. We can elaborate a strategy, it's easy, but to understand how this strategy could be combined with the opportunities provided by the new digital technologies, and how we should develop Ukraine in the background of the challenges Ukraine is faced with. This is a much more complicated thing. We have a profile of Vice Prime Minister, and I would say that he is a very smart person. I'm really learning a lot from him, and I hope that we together will manage to elaborate good things for Ukraine. Thank you.
Why we use English as language for the panel and for KIEF International Economic Forum? Because we have ambitions to put a challenge for us as some forums in Poland to be really international, not international in understanding of Ukrainians, but also international for international community.
Я согласен. Если мы хотим быть доступны международно.
Well, actually, I do agree that if we want to be accessible to everyone, let's speak all the languages: Ukrainian, English, Russian. Chinese was also one of the languages one of the speakers spoke today, and I understood that when I was giving my child to school, and everybody said that her foreign language should be Chinese. That was 20 years ago, and I didn't make this choice. I took a different decision, but I have understood that this is wrong.
International Financial Corporation, a member of World Bank Group, Mr. Pellmar is responsible for managing investment programs and also advisory programs for Ukraine. And you focus your programs on improving business environment and giving access to finances. But that everything looks like you support agro-direction of Ukraine. But looking at your portfolio of your job, you work for General Electric, and you managed their energy assets. You worked in Myanmar, and you had success in leading or managing the projects in infrastructure. We desperately need infrastructure for industrial development or reindustrialization. And when you, as an international financial corporation, when you work in Latin America or in Asia or in Africa, you understand that those countries are the countries of the third or fourth world. When you come here to Ukraine, you think we are a second world country. We are the remnants of Soviet Union, which used to be second world country. And that is maybe for ambitions of Ukrainians, maybe it's better. But it would be better, to my mind, to be a third or fourth world country. When you come here and you bring infrastructure projects, but for industrial development. You think that we are industrially developed because we are a second world country. But maybe you think another way, and then we will have more infrastructure for reindustrialization. So the stage is yours.
Thank you very much for the question. I'm not sure which language I should use now, if it's Burmese or Chinese or...
Yeah, for difference, I think Nicolas could speak 5 more languages. Yes, French, Danish, German, Spanish, and... Norwegian. Yeah, so we have a choice. So it's better English because...
Let's continue in English. But look, I think the question is a good one. Although the framework that you're using, I would suggest not to think in terms of first, second, third world. These are dated and concepts. Ukraine is a middle-income country. And what we need to do is avoid the middle-income trap and have Ukraine accelerate its economic growth, which is very much in line with the policies that the minister has articulated. I think it's also interesting to note the panelists that we have up here having Ukraine as an investment destination. There are no foreign investors, right? We have the minister setting policies, we have reputation addressing an issue, and we have leading local Ukrainian companies. And it's very important to have a strong domestic investor base. And to do that, we need access to capital and a strong investment climate. But really what we're trying to address is to create a framework that will allow for more investment more broadly. And again, coming back to the key themes that have been mentioned, we've discussed land reform, which I think is critical to accelerate economic growth in the country. The agri sector has been the growth engine of the economy, but in order to get more investment in value-add agri, we really are going to see a need on the lifting of the land moratorium. That will help in the banking sector, that will help the agri companies, it will help promote more FDI, and then the international financial institutions like IFC will be able to create instruments to help address some of the cost of capital issues that were addressed earlier by my colleague from Biopharma. I think the other key issue, and I congratulate the government on passing the concession law. We, in Mariupol at the investment forum last week, signed with the Prime Minister an engagement to help create bankable projects in infrastructure. It will include roads, it will include regional airports, it will include the port sector. We are already very advanced on 2 pilot port PPPs in Olva and Kherson. In terms of reputation, I think we're proud to note that even based, when we launched the tender, we didn't have the concession law in place. We were able to attract to a roadshow on October 1, 40 companies from over 10 countries. And this is just the beginning with the concession law in place, and these are mid-tier assets. Once we're talking about the bigger ports, inclusive of even Pivdenny at a future stage, I think we're going to really see an opportunity to bring in your blue chip strategic investors that will drive, again, economic growth in the country. Again, we don't have to limit it to your hard infra. Irrigation can also be potential concessions also for the benefit of the agri sector, but it will depend on the lifting of the land moratorium. No one will invest in irrigation unless there's ownership of the land. And I think another important focus area is the banking sector. We have majority state-owned banks. We have the highest NPLs globally. So the IFC has been working with the government on reducing the state share, helping on the privatization agenda that the minister has articulated. We're at very advanced stages of negotiation on a pre-privatization engagement with Ukrgazbank. And I think this will help, again, set the stage via reputation, via demonstration effect to the other state-owned banks. And also stimulate some of the NPL resolution framework. So I think there is a lot of work to be done in critical areas, but really everything that we do is with the goal of accelerating economic growth and promoting more investment, be it domestic or international. Again, I think IFC is also very present in the domestic space. We're an indirect shareholder in Biopharma via Horizon Capital. We started an engagement with MHP many years ago, both as financier and advisor. I'm very happy to see MHP's success. So we need to find more good companies, local and international, to help Ukraine further its objectives to put itself on the map for international and domestic investment. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. We know that Minister Mylovanov has to leave. So we have a question to you and maybe some final speech for this panel. So the question is, Mr. Mylovanov, you announced that you have a program of cheap credits, 2% a year for agriculture, which is in shadow, and that's why those credits are not used by the borrowers. So, well, it's better to check the procedure, and maybe the problem is in bureaucracy, which with the problems with bureaucracy you have to solve instead of talking that the businesses are wrong. So this is the question.
Well, absolutely. There are issues everywhere, including the bureaucratic procedures, including the barriers. It's not so easy to take those loans. Not all of those loans not everyone who is issuing those loans is very motivated in order to give them. Not always the KPIs are, the percentage of usage. I'm actually appalled, or, I'll put it more diplomatically, I'm extremely surprised by the amount of credit available to us on paper in terms of contracts, in terms of loan lines, and the percentage of usages. It's at 17–20%. Clearly there are barriers. There are barriers on both sides that the businesses don't always demonstrate the proper business model. And yet, not everyone agrees with that, but this is, there is evidence to that. The evidence is that we as the government are forced now to create, and we're happy to do that, but we are forced to create the partial credit guarantee fund for the land market reform. Because there are so many people, especially small and medium farmers, who operate in cash and won't be able to demonstrate the paperwork sufficient for Ukrainian banks, not international banks, but Ukrainian banks, even to consider. Despite the fact that the government additionally will compensate the interest rates. So we have to use two tools, not one. Not only compensate the interest rates, but also create insurance for the businesses which do not have the proper paperwork. Now, from the perspective of a business, I also see the barriers of the banks, because the banks require documentation which sometimes is, excessive in so many ways. This is similar to what you just experienced in our conversation between business and government, or what I think you have alluded, actually both speakers have alluded to. That the growth, the success starts from within. We should find ways to decrease our internal frictions, build trust among ourselves, and work together to bring specifically capital into the country, lower its costs, improve property rights protection, create more companies and investments with value added, and move the country forward. So the growth and success starts within us, where we fight less and work together more, and demonstrate in this way that we can be successful. So that would be my final remark. I ask for cooperation. I promise to you that I personally will do everything I can to foster that cooperation and remove barriers from both sides, from the finance industry and from the real sector. And I hope very much that we will succeed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. We wish you success. Dear guests, dear speakers, we had a 1 hour discussion, and we talked all the time about industrial development, possible reindustrialization, all the sorts of things, except one, which was mentioned as the main direction of development of Ukraine in the next decades, is agro. Mr. Melnyk, who is our speaker also on the panel, he's the first deputy chairman of the board of MHP Agro-Industrial Holding, and he represents the company that creates this agrarian phase, which we all don't like, but we all use it for our development in the world. Mr. Melnyk used to be a minister, so he is well aware of the things which Ms. Mylovanov just told us. And working with MHP, you achieved as a company that you are a leading poultry producers in Europe, and you have strongest food brands in Ukraine. Your strategy involves increased quality of your products, increased land banks, strengthen your market position in Ukraine, but it looks like you don't really like international markets, or maybe I'm mistaken. You're a national champion. You're a giant. Everybody has to like you, and the government has to help you, and society has to love you, because you bring export money and we buy imports. But it's not like that. Everybody wants to decrease your profitability, to put additional taxes on your companies. Mr. Melnyk, how to find a compromise between agribusiness, which feeds us, and industrialization, which can bring us to the future? How to find a balance between champions, which you are, and small, medium enterprises, and that you, as a champion, would bring small companies to the future?
Дякую. Дякую.
Thank you for the introduction, thank you for the question. And probably I would like to comment your question in terms of accessibility of cheap credit is concerned. I think that the experience of the last 2, maybe 3 months has shown us that such companies as, let's say, MHP and other agrarian companies have different opportunities for involving, and they have simpler schemes than we have in the government. And I think that you have been right in saying that some procedures of getting access to credit risk facilities the government has should be simplified. Bureaucracy should be taken away, and then it will be easier to get and give credits. As far as your question is concerned, I would like to tell that MHP is not just an agrarian holding. From my point of view, and I've been working in this company for 10 years already, that is a unique association, a unique business model. And the uniqueness lies in the fact that this is not just an agrarian holding, but this is an entity working in the agrarian foodstuffs sector. And the main product here is not grain, is not some sunflower, unprocessed seeds, but we produce added value products, and we deal with meat processing, for which we also find some niches in the outer markets, in the external markets. Therefore, I would like to say that probably, maybe I'm mistaken with this statement, but we are not afraid of the international market, and we are not positioning ourselves as a famous national leader with Nasha Raba brand. No. Maybe you don't know about this, but in the portfolio of our company, we have 80 countries to which we export our products. And to some countries, the export is rather of large volume. In some countries, no. But every year, we are opening up new markets. And here, I would like to support you, Mr. Chairman, that the state should interfere. It should support us, because new markets are opened up not just by businesses. There are some licenses involved in that, and permission certificates. And if the support does not support us, business will be lagging behind and will feel discomfort about not having access to these new prospective markets. In particular, this now refers to Asian markets, and in particular African markets. That's why I think that we are looking into the future, and all the facilities which have been built over the recent years. And every market has its specific features for our products, and that's why we should provide the quality and the level of the product which is in demand in this market. There are some divergences between Asian, African, and European markets. This is on the one hand, but on the other hand, and you may well trust me, because I represent not just one company, but an agrarian community. On the other hand, agrarian market is not satisfied with being in the position of 15% of GDP, 40% of currency income. It's much better and easier to work within the balanced model when the driving agent is industrial business, when business is developing because it stands for highly paid jobs. This is the consumption market, and I am really advocating the fact that the government should specify its actions, because there shouldn't be any declarative principles, but we should take care of agriculture and of industry, in particular industry, and we should find some preferences for their development. Then this is going to be a well-balanced industrial and agrarian model of the state economic development, and it will ensure development of business, of the country, and every individual. Maybe it sounds more like a slogan, but it's what I really think. Thank you, Mr. Ex-Minister. We may really feel that you were a top-rank official and that you are well-trained in speaking. But that's really important, what you say. We have the examples of Scandinavian countries where agrarian export is 5 or 10 times higher than with us, though they don't have lands. They don't have the conditions and the environment we have. My device is already dying out, and we will have to ask questions in person. We still have 30 minutes, and we can make our discussion a little bit more lively. Because there used to be a fight and a struggle between business and the government, and everybody felt hot in the room, but now you may get relaxed, and please, I'm encouraging you to have a heated discussion here. And the next question is addressed to Mr. Melnyk. He used to be Minister of Agriculture, and has been a question to the Minister of Economic Development, Agriculture and Trade. But you will probably have to face to take this question instead of him. It was addressed to Mr. Mylovanov. So please, could you tell whether there will be a support in the development of gardens and some other areas? I would rather speak about this from the point of view of the land reform, legal. If we speak about the business component, the above sectors require not that much land, and that they are more profitable. So could you please tell whether you really need to help these sectors or no? And if yes, probably you know that recommendations are being prepared for the government on the basis of these discussions, and then the stenogram is made or a discussion is arranged and some analytical blocks are provided for analysis, because in fact really I think a lot of things, of valuable, precious things have been voiced here, so please have your say on this point. Well, unfortunately, this direction of business is not something we have in our company, but I think that this is a rather interesting subsector of our agriculture, which could be developed. This is horticulture, garden work, and this is hobby industry. And I think that the government, represented by the state represented by the government, should find some preferences to support this industry. And if we go back to my period of stay at the ministry, we used to have a law which presupposed partial reimbursement for horticulture. When we were talking about small trees, we have demand for products, and in your speech you have in particular mentioned nuts, different species of nuts trees, and I think that this is the direction that needs to be supported by the state. Okay, one more question, but probably let's give an opportunity to other speakers. As far as the association agreement is concerned, you have suffered, you have been affected by quotas, but for me, as for the expert, it's rather strange that such a highly respected company did not take sufficient participation in the preparation and deliberation of the association agreement, and your interests were not taken into account. So the question after the other speakers will be to you. And you understand Ukrainian, and you speak Ukrainian as far as I understand, no?
Okay. The question to you about the infrastructure. We discussed that you will create the infrastructure for agribusiness, but let's go back to industrial. We visit next week Monaco with the very big conference and forum organized by United Nations Development Organization, and it is about special economic zones and industrial parks in Africa. So Africa, that's something which I told about third and fourth world. So for Africa, international financial cooperation, World Bank, United Nations Development Organizations, all they help to create that. And here we don't see that. So if you would change this policy for Ukraine, maybe it would be better and easier for the government, because when we talk as experts and the deputies of parliament, they talk to the government, and Minister of Finance usually tells no money, no honey. You see? So when we talk about infrastructure, no money, no honey. Each new or old financial minister in Ukraine tells this phrase. So international financial cooperation is the best investor in last 15 years here in Ukraine. If you don't know who is investor, this is you. So why not to come to what you do in Africa?
So thank you for the question. Again, I don't think it's an issue of Africa versus Europe versus Latin America. There are many advanced countries, levels of development in Africa as well, but your question is with regards to special economic zones. Are they relevant for Ukraine? And I think the answer could be yes. You can look to your neighbors. In Belarus, there's a very advanced special economic zone. This was not an IFI-led creation. It was created by the Belarusian government together with the Chinese government. And as a result of creating this industrial park, they have managed to place them on the Belt and Road. And that has led to massive investment into the Belarusian economy. Could Ukraine replicate something similar? One of the reasons for the Belarusian success was they gave a lot of fiscal incentives. Does Ukraine have the ability to offer such fiscal incentives, and should they offer such fiscal incentives? And there the answer is less clear. And so I think there are many positives that you mentioned in terms of investment promotion, reputation, creating a special legal framework, creating the infrastructure. But I think we need to look holistically about how to do this. But I think we're open to such suggestions. I think to me, it comes back to the question of investment promotion. How do we get better investment into the country, but also limiting the amount of fiscal incentives that the sovereign has to offer?
Thank you. So I would like to show this to audience that financial institutions, as at the period of your beginning after Second World War, you are not against that. But who is against is our next government. So the previous government was against, this government looks to be also against. Why? Because we are a corruptive country. We have very high level of corruption. And we tell this to ourselves. So my question to you, Nicolas, do you work with the psychiatric or psychological cases when the person does not have self-legitimation? So I like this girl, I love her, I want to marry her. Why not to do that? I am 18 years old and more. No, I go to my father. Father, do you like this girl? Okay, I love her. Why shouldn't I marry? So it looks like that reputation should be explained not to the outer world, because outer world tells no problem. You work and we give you money for infrastructure. What about this reputation?
Well, so I think that's a great question. Well, one of the most important drivers of people's perceptions in terms of countries is safety. So the idea of safety either as a visitor or as an investor. And so all I can say from the studies that we do of investors of different countries is that they're looking at the Ukraine and seeing instability in terms of the investments that they supposedly would make in the country for the reasons that you just made right now, plus other reasons that I think we all in the audience and in the panel know about. So what do investors do? Well, they shy or go towards where the stability and the risks, if you will, are more limited, and where the rewards probably would be the same or higher, but certainly that's what they would look at. And so in terms of Ukraine, the risk would probably currently be too high vis-a-vis other opportunities that they have for investment.
But it's not about risk. It's about self-legitimation and your own attitude to your own reputation. If I tell I'm bad, and I tell everybody I'm bad, then they will think I'm bad. This is about Ukraine. How do you cure this disease with the Reputation Institute?
Yeah, and I think it's back to what I started talking about in the beginning of my introduction, which has to do with finding Ukraine's identity. So what exactly is it that Ukraine is? And not doing that by necessarily looking into books or interviewing external people. It's by asking all of you and the historians, the anthropologists of the Ukraine, what exactly is it that Ukraine is? And then use that to communicate, both internally, disseminate the knowledge about what Ukraine supposedly is internally and make people believe that, and then go externally. Hopefully that'll change people's mentality in terms of the fact that you are bad.
So the healing is possible.
I think the journey is long and it's a never-ending story, but yes, absolutely, I think there is a solution.
Okay, please, question from audience.
Дякую. Гужва Ігор, директор Центру розвитку ринкової економіки. Виходячи з назви нашої панелі «Україна на глобальній економічній мапі», я хотів би звернути увагу, що такі нішові товари, як літаки, кораблі, космічна галузь, це вже скоріше схоже на історію України на світовій мапі. На сьогодні ми більш відомі, там зерно, руда і меншою часткою там може IT, якась там інша продукція машинобудування. Це ми відомі в світі. А що це означає для нас в межах країни? Це деіндустріалізація, темпи зростання за цей рік лише там 0,1% промисловість. Це погіршення якості життя населення, що призводить до міграції. І невже це є нашим вироком для України? Чи, можливо, є якісь практичні поради від спікерів, як цю ситуацію поміняти, щоб наш міністр економіки взяв це на борт, як то кажуть, і запровадив? Буквально, якщо можна, коротенько, раз, два, три, там. Дякую.
До всіх спікерів.
What was the question?
The question was if it is predicted that we will be agrarian, whether it is possible to develop, what is your recommendation to the government?
The question, so I think, as I mentioned earlier, the agrarian sector has been one of the key growth engines of the economy, and that needs to continue. But it shouldn't be the only sector that is focused on by business and by government. You also mentioned manufacturing, and manufacturing indeed hasn't really reached its potential. And so this is something that we are looking into in terms of, and manufacturing has changed very rapidly over the past decade or so, where most manufacturing is not done in a single entity in a single country. It's now very diversified. And so what we're looking at is how to put Ukraine more on the global map for global value chain type manufacturing. And there are certain success stories. You have the automotive sector in the western part of the country, but this is more labor-based manufacturing as opposed to capital-intensive type manufacturing, which may be okay, but as Ukraine grows, the cost of labor will increase, and then that industry dries up. So what we're looking at, again, is to look at how to promote more manufacturing in Ukraine. And I think there are certain business segments which lend themselves where Ukraine can be a part of that sector. We heard about the head example in Vinnytsia, but these are instead of being able to count these examples on your hand, we really need to promote Ukraine as a good destination for manufacturing. But that comes back to the infrastructure question. No one is going to manufacture unless they can get their goods to market. So it's better roads, it's access to inexpensive and reliable electricity, so improving the energy sector. So manufacturing doesn't help happen in isolation. It's creating the investment framework and the infrastructure to enable it to flourish.
No, I couldn't agree more that diversification into focusing on other industries as well is super important. I don't know Ukraine that well, so I wouldn't be able to be an expert on what those industries should be, but certainly the more diverse, the better it is. And just to quickly comment on what you were asking about before in terms of investors and how they look at things. So we work with Moody's and Bloomberg in terms of providing them with information on what the reputation is of different companies around the world. We measure the reputation of 7,500 companies every year using this tool, asking people like you what it is they think about companies. Knowing that, and then knowing the fact that 80% of the market cap on average of companies on S&P 500 is intangible asset, right? Then reputation becomes extremely important. 80% of the market cap of companies out there is not book value, it's intangible asset. It's something that people are expecting you to do in the future. The same goes for this country. If there is no hope for the country, then people won't invest in it. So it's about building up that perception about the fact that there is a future for the Ukraine. Question is what those pillars should be. I can't tell you what that should be right now, but certainly that's the process we've started with the Business 100 and the government in terms of finding out what is it that those pillars should be that should attract people to this country in the future.
Thank you. Колеги, перед тим, як я вам надам слово, я хочу нагадати.
Before I give the floor to you, I will just remind you that we have only 10 minutes. So please raise your hands, those who would like to ask questions. Well, I think that we don't have that much time. So please, you were the first to raise your hands, so please ask the question. The question to Kostyantyn and to Yuriy. Please don't just answer the question which has been asked by our expert, but also try to summarize your recommendations, taking into account the fact that this forum still unites not just an event. This is not just an event, this is a recommendation platform. And I'm reminding you that you need to vote because the figures are changing, and that is important for us to see what has changed, and we will try to summarize the results after your final voting. So please, the organizers, I would ask you to give the results, and if you have not yet voted, please vote. Please be louder. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. So throughout our panel, Ukraine on the global economic map, I've got a question to Yuriy and Kostyantyn. For your companies, what does digitalization mean for you now? I mean, what is the share of digitalization per year in terms of investment into IT, and what are the teams you are working with in this direction? Well, thank you. I could tell in very simple terms that the task of our team for the nearest years is complete digitalization and question of not just the business segment, but such directions as our logistics, and we could even touch upon distribution and sales, which are also important aspects. MHP system should be transferred wholly to digital technologies, that is for sure. If we take the segments of land bank management and controlling system, resource spending system, if we also take technological production management in the field of poultry and plant growing, I would say that we have implemented already a lot of projects developed together with many companies, and we have some internal developments. Though we probably don't like it that much because every company in the agrarian sector has its own development. MHP has one, Kernel has a different, BMK has a different, Astarta has its own, which is not absolutely correct because our business in a lot of things is similar, it's pretty much the same, but we have chosen different paths. But I think that in the future we will still reach a certain model of introduction of digital technologies into the agrarian business. And I will also use the opportunity to answer the question which has been asked. I may tell you that we have achieved a certain success, but the most terrible thing for us is to stop. That's important because every day is dedicated to the changes taking place in business, and we can see that the productivity and efficiency of business in both directions, in plant breeding, plant growing and animal breeding, well, it may be higher. The other important thing is the issue of increasing efficiency, because if we don't have the system of subsidies, if we have problems of accessing external markets because economic nationalism is somehow still manifested, we need to work at the productivity, at the efficiency of work, and definitely at their development of export. Export is an example of vertically integrated processes. I would like to draw your attention to some niche products, because we have spoken about gardens, in particular nut trees. I think that this is not a topic for large holdings to cover, but for SMEs it would be pretty good. And on the other hand, it should also be supported by some state preferences. And of course, some organic products produced in Ukraine, this is a prospective direction, and it also can find its niche in the world market. From the point of view of combining agrarian and industrial components, I would say that it will be difficult to work in the conditions of our current industry if we don't have any substantial investment, but the state will play its role. It has to play its role, and again, I'm repeating, selected priorities, creation of preferences, and business involvement, and this will help to restore industry in Ukraine. Okay, one more question, and we will need to summarize. I don't know how we choose the best question, but let's give the floor to the youngest, the person who seems to be the youngest. Well, thank you for the compliment. The question is to Nicolas.
Of Ukraine are its people, and the president made it clear that he's interested in people that are working abroad and self-actualizing abroad to come back to Ukraine. Just wondering, for the Reputation Institute, what is your role? Have you done any research on how the country's reputation influences the propensity of immigrants that are working abroad to come back and help the development of their home country? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do surveys on that as well, and try to figure out what the drivers are for them in order to come back once they've gone somewhere else. And obviously the drivers would be what you would expect it to be for anybody else. It's really to have the right foundation at home in your market in terms of possibilities to work, possibilities to earn money, possibilities to do all the different things that people want in life. And so if you get that more so in other places in the world, people will not necessarily come back unless they have, are more nationalistically oriented, and so they would want to do it for the sake of the country. sadly, people aren't necessarily always like that, so they would tend to go to London or go to New York or wherever else they go in order to get a good job. So they would need reform in order for it to be attractive for them to come back.
So what are some of the steps that you could take?
Well, so
Добре, я пропоную вже тоді
Well, I think that we need somehow to, because there must be some gender equality, so I think we need to stop with this. We need to keep to the issue of gender equality. I would like to say that recently, over 5 or 7 years, we have not just been getting new laws, but every new government is generating this sort of new laws. And you know that the concession law has been passed recently, and if a businessman wants to implement, to have this law implemented, well, he will have to spend about 2 years, and it's not yet the end. We have some laws, other laws, but if you could go over to the question. Yeah, I would ask the question because over the last 5 years, not a single state-owned enterprise has been taken within concession, within privatization. So the question is to Kostyantyn Yefymenko. We can see that this person represents real sector of economy. And what would he do? Would he introduce new laws, being the Minister of Economy? So just a couple of actions that would lead Ukraine on the global economic to the global economic level, that Ukraine would become country number 1. Well, thank you for the question. It seems to me that it's not the law that we lack. We lack actions and we lack ideas. As far as actions are concerned, well, and who prevents us from stopping raiding and those raid attacks? Don't we know who is doing this, who is behind that? Can we put handcuffs on this person and show it on TV and say that that is going to happen to everyone? And that will be the end to that. We need clear actions, not the law. Nobody will ever invest the money into the country if the assets could be taken away from you there. That is the fundamental action. We're not afraid of constructing things because we know how to build, and we know who takes away, and we will really keep fighting till our last breath. But the foreign investors will not come because they don't know the ways out in this country. And also we need to find levers for making credit rate lower. When we have money in the account, it's much easier to buy a plant. But you know, if that is a complicated plant, it will be difficult. You cannot buy such high-tech plants without money. This will not happen from thin air. We have spent a lot of $1 million on our our plant built lately. Also, we need to sell everything. Auction system will do. So everything should be sold out. Also, we need to understand what our key plans, system-making plans were, and if people who got in 1995, 1996 some property, it's okay. But if they are not effective, if they live in Vienna and they're trying to manage this law from abroad, well, definitely you need to resell it, to have reprivatization, because welfare of people depends on that. In my town, Bilatsarko, we used to have a very large plant with gave jobs to a lot of people, and we don't have this. We need to resell this plant once again. And also we need to get clear about the breakthrough point. Let's not think about ships, about airplanes. Let's not think about IT so far. Biopharma is located in the business center with the cycle company with $300 million. Give a call to this company and ask how many taxes it has paid this year. Biopharma has paid $200 million, and cycle has not paid that many taxes. So that is a real issue. It gets money offshore, it pays salaries to some sole proprietors, so there are special false schemes, money laundering schemes in a way. So why shouldn't we tell Cardil that the cost of grain in 5 years will be like 40,000 per ton? So let's just determine what our priorities directions are. Why should we build a certain policy for certain plants? Because every plant is in the situation when it can actually help another plant. I mean, I told you that not a single product is produced in one plant. And our people have two tasks. The first one is to create family, and the second one is to create production facility. But people need incentives and they need money. Of course, if there is $1 million of hryvnias for a person, and then the person gives it on deposit, but he will never earn the money necessary to build a plant. We need to be realistic about our financial sector. We don't need to help such people as we are, but we need to help our young people. And the seventh point is that we have a lot of IT guys, we have a lot of actors, international consultants and advisors who provide recommendations as to where we should go and how we should do this and that. But let's try to tell that it's great to be a businessman, it's great to be rich, it's great to be a capitalist, it's great to live in our country and to fight in all the markets. That is what is really great. Thank you.
This was final speech.
So this was a very good speech to conclude with. And the only thing I would like to tell you is that we need to summarize your voting because you really worked, and blonde girls keep asking very nice questions which make the whole panel highly controversial and with heated discussion. So the first issue, deregulation, went from 3 to 1%. Business protection was approximately at the same level, from 27 to 28, or rather vice versa. Then new agreements, new free trade agreements. We didn't give the floor to Yuriy, but I hope you are not offended with this. You had a very perfect speech. So from 1 to 3%, and financial support of exporter development stayed at approximately the same level. It was 72, it became 71%. Therefore, the Ministry of Economic Development should really see that for people the most important thing is not to be interfered into the activity. You can see that financial support is in the first place, that is the opinion of our audience, and business protection, and then come free trade agreements and deregulation. And you can see that for some reason it's not important for people here. So thanks a lot to everyone, good luck to you, and thanks.